Hey guys, welcome to the Max Life. Today we're going to be talking about gardening without chemicals.
And we want to share with y'all our passion behind all of this. Kind of what kicked us off to looking into food, looking into personal hygiene items, and really what all started this for us. Back about, I guess it would have been 8 or 9 years ago.
Probably.
We had a gentleman that sat in front of us in church. He was 19 years old, and when he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, it really just kind of hit us like a ton of bricks. We really began to talk about what is causing this. Now, I have a medical background. I have a degree in nursing, and it really began the process of where I wanted to research and learn more of what was going on with cancer and all of the other health problems that we see. And through that research and a lot of that studying, we really found that the link is in food and a lot of our everyday items that we use that are in our homes, like our skincare products, our cleaning products, just to name a few. That really kind of began our journey into kicking out chemicals. That would be a good title.
That would be
Kicking out chemicals. We started in one area, and I began to clean up our bathroom items, which rolled into our kitchen items, which rolled into our styles of gardening, which is where we're gonna hit today.
So when we talk about gardening without chemicals, we have to think of how's our soil and what kind of soil we're growing in. We also need to know what zone we're growing in and what we're trying to grow, and also what kind of grass or weed pressure that we have. So it depends on how we grow it, where we grow it, and what it's growing in to really see a garden thrive. We want to work with what God gives us with our soils and with our zones versus working against it, because it already is an uphill battle when we try to do it organically. So for instance, right here in Misty's kitchen garden, we'll look under this plum tree, for instance. This soil is more rich, more fertile. So for instance, what we've had to do with this soil is not as much amendments because it's a good quality soil. However, in some of our other gardens, we have a more clay and a compacted soil. So if it's wet, what do you have to do to it? If it's clay, what kind of amendments do we need to put stuff in it? Are we doing more root vegetables so we can grow in raised beds? So all that matters when we're talking about soil. So when we talk about this soil here, it's great. There's not a lot of amendments to it, and we'll talk about how we're fertilizing. I want to bring up one more thing while we're here. Misty, show the plastic in the weed barrier. Okay. So we have to learn what battles do best and how we fight our battles when it comes to weed and grass pressure. Just as we talked about, soil's important, but also how we repel the grass, repel the weeds. Well, this is one of those ways. Misty will talk a little bit about the insects and what she does to keep the animals off that with companion planting. But this is one great way that we know that we don't have to worry about grass growing into our beds. Another way, and we'll walk over here and look, you can see it's just like a sea of black over here because we have weed berry going everywhere in the high tunnel, even around the strawberries. But look right here in our sweet potato bed, we've got raised beds. That's another way to grow without having to worry about the weed pressure. So we have good quality soil. We have a way to keep the weeds away from it. Now let's talk about what we're growing in it and the importance there.
Grow with what does best for you. So we've shared this with y'all many a times. We know that sweet potatoes do really, really well in our area. So we would almost be dumb to not grow sweet potatoes in our season, because we know that we like sweet potatoes. They grow really well for us. So we're gonna plant them and grow them all over the place because we know that sweet potatoes do well in South Mississippi. So one more thing I want to mention while we're here is the quality of your seeds. If you have a good quality seed, when we're talking about growing without chemicals, so we're talking about not spraying insecticides and herbicides and stuff like that on your fruits and vegetables and the things that you're growing. So one thing that you can do is having quality seeds. That's very, very important. Over time, if you learn how to seed keep, here's another tip. If you learn how to seed keep from your heirloom seeds, your seeds are going to build resistance to not only disease, but also against pests as well, which will dramatically decrease your need for spraying your raised beds, gardens, and other areas that you have planted. If you guys didn't check out my very sappy video about our corn, y'all be sure to go back and check that out. But here's where we are on the corn. Y'all know that a big storm come through and we had this really, really tall. It blew all of my corn over. Now this area is very specific for a certain reason, and I'll touch that in just a minute. Y'all saw my corn blow over. It's replanted. Now, I did just come and row those up yesterday, and I put rattlesnake beans over in there as well. Mostly I companion planted here to help establish another root system that will go up my corn, help stabilize it in the ground. Now, I have some other areas I want to walk y'all to where I companion planted things like marigolds to keep insects and those type pests from destroying my crops.
Also, the importance of not only stabilization with the companion plants here, it's also a legume, so it's adding nitrogen back to the soil.
Hey, I said we weren't going to talk about the soil quite
I know,
yet.
but I was just going to bring that up. Companion planting is important for several different reasons, and that is 2 of the reasons right there. For instance, here with companion planting, not only that, we have barrier, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but the soil here is great. Like we said, we just basically topped it off with new soil, so we have a lasagna method right here in this Back to Eden style gardening. But right here with the tomatoes, we have basil and marigolds growing. Both of those help repel insects and also make sure that our tomatoes are safe. Everything loves to eat our tomatoes. So by having companion planting with it, it allows it to be more safe. Misty was talking about onions and garlic, and we plant a lot of onions and garlics and alliums all over the farm. A lot of times with onions and garlic, it helps repel things as well. So a lot of herbs, a lot of alliums, and also a lot of flowers can be used as companion plantings, not for the benefit of just having the secondary crop like basil. Basil we use and we dehydrate and use all the time, but it's really more for repelling. One thing when it comes to companion planting, you need to decide, are we wanting to have it for use, or are we wanting it to benefit the main crop that's growing? So that's the importance of companion planting.
There are some plants that are friends, and there are some plants that are enemies. You know, that has been a major process for me to learn what grows well together and what does not like to be planted beside each other. And I have a tool that I think is going to benefit you tremendously, and I'm going to post a link to an app that tells you all of that information. You can actually go in and type in whatever you're wanting to plant, and it will tell you what is friends with the plant and what the plant does not like to grow beside.
So right here, as we were talking, right where the companion planting is, we have more barrier. We use our cardboard feed sacks. They're all natural feed sack. We place underneath this rock, and this rock helps us take care of some of the water flow issues and making sure all this crop gets good drainage. Not only that, it helps with weed suppression again. So we use rock, we use the cardboards for our advantage. We're doing a lot more with Back to Eden style gardening here. So these are no-till beds. Another thing you'll notice with these beds here is every time we take up a crop, we succession plant with something else. We have the strawberries growing here, so they're perennial. But right next to that, you have sunflowers that are growing for our bees, so that's a benefit crop there. Right next to here, we have more perennials. Then we have some more annuals. And we just keep adding new things as something plays out. This was once garlic just this fall and early spring. Now it's sweet potatoes, more mullein, even some ginger is coming up, and we have one little elderberry that's starting to grow too. So it's all about making sure your soil is of the best quality because you're keeping things growing in it, you're topping it back off, you're not tilling in it, so you're building this ecosystem in your soil.
I want to hit y'all up with some ways that I fertilize a lot of the stuff right around my greenhouse. Now, when we had the rabbits closer to where we were at, I was using majority rabbit manure and making some compost tea with that. Because our rabbits are way down at the big barn, it's really hard for me to get it down here as frequently as I like. So I have started using comfrey tea, and it's just as easy as getting my comfrey leaves. I cut them up and let them break down in some water and use those in my soil, in my greenhouse, and all the areas that you just saw us talking about right around our greenhouse. So instead of using chemicals right here in our ground, we really want to keep those man-made synthetics out of our soil. As we've researched and studied, those things help your plants grow wonderfully, but they're putting compounds in your plants as they grow that's also going into your food, and you are now ingesting those chemicals, which we have chose to stay away from. So along with our comfrey is making use of our animals and their manure to work for us. Maybe not everybody would have, but if you have chickens, you have access to it. So this was an old area where our old chicken coop used to be. Colby talked to y'all a little bit about the water drainage issues. The wood was rotting out. It was not ideal for our chickens, and that's the reason why we moved those. We've shared that with y'all. But we weren't gonna let this fertile ground go to waste right here. So we planted it with corn. This is time number 2. Hopefully, we're hoping that the gusts of wind don't come through this time and completely wipe out our corn. But in bad storms, you know, just sometimes it happens. But it had grown absolutely beautiful. And if you know anything about organically growing corn, it is very hard to do. You can't just walk through and dump liquid nitrogen all over your corn to give it that boost that it needs. There are a lot of other things that you have to do. We already had our liquid nitrogen right here from our chickens that was already broke down. Please do not put hot manure on your food because it will burn it for sure. But this was already here, it was already broke down. We did not want it to go to waste. So we come up with a wonderful way to utilize all of that nitrogen in the ground with the nitrogen loving plant corn.
So the cost of fertilizer, conventional fertilizer, and the shortages didn't really affect us. Why? Because we have the things like the comfrey tea that Misty just talked about. The rabbits, the chickens, they are vital to us, including down to the smallest of creatures such as the worms, the bees, and even the fish. Every few days we'll come and we'll use these big feed buckets we don't want to ever waste, so we'll use this, upcycle it, and they become what holds our fertilizer or our manures. We'll clean out the rabbit cages, which we're fixing to actually do in just a second, put it in there, and we'll actually make a rabbit manure tea like Misty makes, the compost tea. And we feed everything that we have up this way. Also, we built this, and we talked about this in the homestead video. If you hadn't seen the farm tour, go back and check it out. But these panels just come off, so when we want to use this nitrogen-rich fertilizer that's on the ground from these chickens, so all this pine shavings, once it composts, we'll be able to utilize it also in our gardens and being able to side dress anything that we're needing to grow, especially things like heavy feeders such as the corn, such as tomatoes, such as asparagus or pumpkins. All those need a lot of nutrients. Chickens and rabbits do a lot to help because of the fertilizer they're dropping out the back end. So what else? If we don't have animals, or you don't have animals, which I believe you need to get bees or get worms or fish or chickens especially. But if you don't have those things, what are some other things household-wise that you could use in your gardens?
Even if you don't have chickens, you can still use the eggshells, but if you have chickens, don't toss the eggshells because those are also something very, very easy right from your kitchen that you can use. Something that I just did was dehydrated my eggshells and my banana peels because I already had the dehydrator on, ground those right into powder and popped them right over into a pot full of calcium and potassium to feed your plants, to give your plants back those nutrients that they need without having to buy synthetic chemicals.
The basis for all compost is grass clippings. It's leaves. That's things that naturally occur in your yard every fall and every time you have to cut grass. Take those, learn how to compost that, and you're adding nitrogen and a carbon source back to your gardens. Think about coffee grounds, how valuable they are, a nitrogen-rich additive that you can put back in your garden. So those amendments are things that you're already using, you're already purchasing, and then you can turn around and add back to your garden. Now, you can pee in your gardens. Now, I know that's a lot said right there, but urine is a good thing. We use it for the animals, but I know a guy that has a market garden, and he literally has a compost pile. Instead of having an outdoor toilet, he pees in his compost, which is a little weird, but it's a good source of nitrogen if it's needing nitrogen.
If all else fails and you say, you know what, I work a full-time job, I want to grow a couple of things in my garden, but I don't have the animals, I really don't have time to deal with building my own compost. Here are some things that you can actually buy for your garden that are natural, that you can put on your plants that are not chemical based. Fish emulsion. It does not smell wonderful, but you can use fish emulsion. Bone meal and blood meal are some other amazing options that you can feed your soil with.
So now, conclusion, and some things that you need to think about. You're gonna have successes and failures when it comes to gardening. Gardening is a big deal, and it is hard work. When it comes to organic gardening though, you're adding a whole nother level. You're either gonna work harder or pay more for the things that you are having to buy to amend your soil, because it's not things that are typical now in our world that we live in. So remember, you will have some success, you will have some failures. You have to work a little bit harder. I feel like we work longer and harder in our gardens than a lot of people do, just because we tend to do it as natural and holistic as possible. As Misty talked about the seeds earlier and saving seeds, you need to find out what works best for you. That's why journaling comes in. You know what's good, you know what's successful to you. If you want to try something new and have a trial there, great. But you have to learn, okay, these are the things that we need to grow in our area that's gonna thrive, and this is gonna feed our family. So let's just kind of cut out the rest of it and make what's important, what's growing, what does the best and have the best success rate. That's the ones we want to utilize the most.
Colby's better at that than I am, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, but we hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed, y'all please be sure to do that. It really does help us out a lot. Happy homesteading, y'all.